The following program contains alcohol. Not just any alcohol. It's wine. It's fancy. Come on, it's the good stuff. Hi again, your tall friend here, and resident podcast wine geek. I'm in between guests and needed to say a few things, so as I sip my wine, indulge me. This is the Tall Mike Wine Podcast, the wine podcast that's not all about wine, the wine podcast like no other. I'm Mike Stone, your host, spanning the globe, dropping little pieces of wine-related fun in 48 countries on 6 continents and in 47 of these United States. Now, you may be saying to yourself, but Mike, there are 50 states, and you'd be correct. However, we are missing the following states: North Dakota, South Dakota, and New Mexico. Let's see if I can get their attention. Hello? Hello? Well, at least we still have the attention of Ormond Beach, Florida, Russellville, Arkansas, The Colony, Texas. What the heck is that? Should I be afraid? And Ocean Shores, Washington, where the official town slogan is, "Don't go in the water, it's fucking cold." Okay, I've got some scars from my childhood. I thank you for joining me. Tell your friends, rate the podcast, review the podcast, take the podcast with you wherever you go, and tell me about it. Send me an email to tallmikewine@gmail.com, and I'll send you a set of your very own official Tall Mike Wine coasters. Recently, I sent coasters to Stewart in Carnation, Washington. That's up in the hills far east of Seattle. Also, coasters went out to my pal Joanne in Seattle, who in her spare time writes a food blog. You should check it out. It's called uglyducklingbakery.com. I also sent coasters to Amy down in Costa Rica. I sent them, but I have no idea if they will ever arrive. But this was interesting to learn. They aren't at all into house numbers and street names in Costa Rica. It's just that laid back. If you Google the B&B that Amy runs, the Hidden Jungle Beach House, you won't get an address. You'll get the following, and I quote, "Location, 50 meters south of first house on the left, on the road behind Playa Negra Brewing." Yeah, piece of cake getting all that on the envelope. I hope the coasters find you, Amy. Oh, hey, remember Alan Clifford? The Barolo-swilling Los Angeles-based podcaster and wine bon vivant we chatted with on episode 28, The Wine Situation? Shortly after we chatted for my podcast, I was a guest on her podcast, and that episode is going to drop soon. Look for it. I'm featured towards the end. No, at the end, really. Like the last 5 minutes of the show. That's showbiz. But check it out. The Wine Situation. Once in a while, I like to ask my guests about podcasts they listen to. Since I'm still trying to find good ones for myself, I've found a couple recently that I really like. The first one is a books podcast called Red Fern Book Review Podcast, hosted by Amy Mayer. Amy came to Nicholson Ranch with friends a while back, the second time I've encountered a fellow podcaster at the winery. Her podcast is discussion about books with authors and other book lovers. The current episode is called Summer Reads, if you're looking for help choosing a good book for the new season. Oh, and Amy is Canadian, so she gets points for that. The Canadians, they're just so likable. The other podcast I've been getting into is a little more out there. It's hosted by two people, a husband and wife, Syrah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames, who met and got married while involved in a cult. Eventually, they began to realize the cult was not only taking over control of their lives, but the charismatic, toxic, narcissist, sociopath leader of the cult was doing all sorts of bad things. Prostitution, human trafficking, bad things. He's now in jail, serving a 120-year sentence for all the bad things. The hosts of the podcast were featured in an HBO docuseries recounting all of this culty stuff and how they eventually testified to put this guy away. The series called The Vow. Now they host a podcast, and the podcast is called A Little Bit Culty. I'm just wrapping up a couple days off from the winery, and here's what I've been sipping on my weekend. Syrah. Syrah from Walla Walla, Washington. But two very different takes on said wine. First, a sort of wild, spicy, brambly, and meaty rendition from Sleight of Hand Cellars, the Levitation Syrah from 2013. A few things regarding the grapes in this and the winemaking techniques give this wine a very rustic feel. First, it's a blend of grapes from 3 vineyards, one of which is in the area south of Walla Walla in Milton Freewater, Oregon. They call this the Rocks District for the large rocks the vines are planted among, and that infuses everything with a bright, almost crunchy minerality. Those rocks soak up the heat all day from the sun and keep things a bit warmer overnight. Interesting, right? Also, a very small percentage of new oak in the aging process lets the fruit really show its flavor. And finally, almost half of the grapes were fermented whole cluster. Imagine a tank full of grapes fermenting, just the grapes, which is pretty typical, for a very pure fruit flavor. Now imagine a tank with the whole clusters, stems and all, fermenting. This typically adds a peppery savoriness to the wine, and this wine is certainly all of that. Hats off to Trey Bush, the winemaker and chief maestro of the Kick-Ass record collection at their Walla Walla tasting room. You can hear more about Sleight of Hand if you listen back to my vacation episode from late 2021. Next, a much more round and rich, fruit-focused Syrah from the 2012 vintage from Vapiano Vineyards. It's a single vineyard effort made from the Lewis Vineyard. Deep, dark aromas and flavors of plum, blackberries, violets, vanilla. A sexy wine indeed. Justin Wiley makes the wine and started Vapiano back in 2003 after making wine in his garage for a few years. He's Walla Walla born, Walla Walla raised, 4th generation Walla Wallan. Vapiano not only has a tasting room in Walla Walla on the south side, but they have a tasting room in Bend, Oregon as well. The name Vapiano means to go slowly and is taken from the Italian proverb Chi va piano va sano e va lontano, meaning those who have an easygoing and relaxed approach to life live healthier and longer. And I will drink to that. So tell me what's in your glass. I'd love to know what wines you're sipping, from where, and with what. Yeah, I'm nosy that way, for real. Would you tag me in your Instagram posts about wine? I'm at TallMikeWine, and I have a hashtag that I use, #SexyBottleShot. Feel free to use it yourself, and it'd also be great if you followed me on Instagram. Got a question, comment, suggestion for a guest? Send me an email. TallMikeWine@gmail gets it to me. And if you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send back a few official Tall Mike Wine podcast coasters. I'll let you know if and when those coasters find their way to Amy in Costa Rica. The Tall Mike Wine podcast was conceived and is written, produced, edited, and maintained by yours truly. I also curate the wine list and do all the dishes. I thank you for listening. I'll be back again soon with another guest, more conversation, more wine, and more fun. For now, from my home in Novato, California, I'm Mike Stone. Cheers.